Hello, everybody. Welcome to the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg, and I'm here with my good friend, the Renaissance man of the Rockies. You're nodding your head in agreement, right?
I like it. You gave me the nickname. I like it.
How are you, John?
I'm doing good. How about you, Bernie?
Good. I want to talk about the Iran situation and the media, but first I want to say that we've received many is an understatement, many new subscribers in the last 24 hours. I was on Bill O'Reilly's show yesterday. I talked to his audience. I asked them to come over. I told them they'd agree with us sometimes, they'd disagree with us sometimes, but we'd always give them our honest opinions. That's all it is, opinions. And they came over. And I want to thank every single one of them individually and as a group. I can't tell you how much John and I appreciate the fact that you're trusting us to get some honest information. It means a lot to me personally. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now on to the subject. Our journalists, are they rooting for failure in Iran? I know that's a harsh question. I've been in the world of journalism longer than many of you have been alive. So let me say that journalists should not be cheerleaders for this war or for any war. We not only have a right, we have an obligation to ask hard questions and be skeptical of what the government is telling us about the war. That's important. But just because we're not cheerleaders doesn't mean we should become partisans against the war. No, that's not right. Here's the problem. And Bill O'Reilly last night nailed this. Here's what happens, especially on television, on cable television especially. The host or the anchors bring on liberal and progressive Democrats, ask them what they think about Donald Trump and the war, and they trash the president and they trash the war. And then the journalists sit there like potted plants. And if we accuse them of being biased, they say, whoa, wait a second. We didn't do anything. It was yeah, it's funny, John. We brought experts on, and they had negative things to say about the war. That's a trick journalists play when they want to get their point of view snuck in and try to do it without leaving any fingerprints. It's wrong. It shouldn't happen. And it's happening every day on cable television, especially. Now, one of the main reasons that journalists and their Democratic allies are against the war is they say Donald Trump went to war when there was no imminent threat. Okay, let's say they're right. For argument's sake, there's no imminent threat. I never understood that argument. Should we wait until there is an imminent threat? Does that make sense? Because if we wait until there is an imminent threat, Iran will have more protection of their nuclear missile. Their missiles will be ready to launch against anybody who comes after their nuclear device. And if they have a nuclear bomb, they'll be able to hit London, Paris, Berlin, Tel Aviv for sure, maybe even New York or Washington, D.C. And you know what would happen then, John, and everybody listening to us right now? The same journalists who are trashing Donald Trump for going to war when there was no imminent threat would trash him because he waited too long until there was an imminent threat. So he can't win. Democrats and their liberal allies in the media figure heads they win, tails Donald Trump loses. I told Bill yesterday, I'll tell the audience today, it's a rigged game. John?
Yeah, no, I think that's largely correct. There are indeed a number of people on the left, including many Democratic politicians and a good number of media people, both journalists and commentators, who are I think, hoping for things to go very poorly in Iran, as far as the Trump administration is concerned. To a lesser extent, there are some people on the right who seem to want that too. I'm talking about the Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly wing. Some of it has to do with anti-Israel sentiment, but more so on the left, I think they really do want to see Trump hurt over this. And so far, the issue has hurt Trump. His approval ratings keep falling. Gas prices are certainly part of that, which is a direct, well, maybe indirect result of Iran. Gas was one of the few things in the Trump economy that had been pretty cheap, but that's no longer the case. And with Trump's tariffs keeping prices high on pretty much everything else over the last year, people are not in the mood for gas prices being high as well. Also, I think it's important to note that Trump and his administration, whether you support what they're doing in Iran, which I do, they haven't, in this, I've seen this criticism a lot, and I think there's validity to it. They have not made a great case for this war to the American people, even though there is certainly a great case to be made. You kind of hear a bunch of different things thrown out at different times by different people. But, and I think also because they sidestepped Congress on this entirely, the Democrats aren't going to be blamed for anything bad that happens with this operation. People remember back to when we went to Iraq, George W. Bush, he got Congress involved. People still called it Bush's war after that, but the Democrats approved that war. They approved what he was doing. So this was not so much the case. So when people say this is Trump's war, I guess the Democrats probably have a better point because he didn't go through Congress.
You don't have to approve of the way they're messaging this war. You don't have to approve of the many different versions of why they're doing it to be against the bias in the news. And that's the distinction. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, John's a conservative and Bernie's a conservative. So, of course, they're defending what's going on. Let me read you something. Two people who are not MAGA Republicans wearing red hats wrote in the Wall Street Journal. Mark Penn, who was an advisor to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and Andrew Stein, who was the president of the New York City Council. And you don't get that job unless you're a Democrat, okay? Listen to what these two wrote. Journalists have a right and a duty to report bad news and to question Pollyanna-ish reports from the US government. But many seem to be going beyond that, ready for this, and rooting for America to lose. Now, why do they say that? Rooting for America to lose. That's a pretty strong statement. They say, what seems to be driving the coverage is repertorial partisanship and the Democrats' determination to oppose this president no matter what he does. That, to me, is the key. Democrats are opposing the president no matter what he does, and journalists who are, as I wrote in my column this week, journalists who are the little dummies sitting on the Democrats' lap. The Democrats are the ventriloquists. They're singing from the same songbook. Let me make one other point and before we move on. I said earlier we can't be cheerleaders, and we can't. Journalists can't, but we are Americans. We are Americans, and Democrats should be able to say that they at least are happy with the military success thus far. They can't say it. They can't say it. I heard a commentator on Fox last night say he was listening to Chuck Schumer on a morning show, and he was asked point blank, are you happy with the military success? And he couldn't say yes. He said, it's premature, it's this, it's that. That's not right. That's just not right. As I said, we shouldn't be cheerleaders. Democrats shouldn't be cheerleaders either, for that matter. But they shouldn't be automatically opposed to everything about it. And they should be able to say, you know what? I'm glad we knocked out as much military arsenal as we knocked out in Iran. And I'm glad we knocked out the leadership. Some of them have been saying that to some extent, but with no enthusiasm. Okay.
Yeah,
Anything
and
else?
that just I'll add just to that, Bertie. That should be the easiest thing for anybody to be able to say because our military has done, by any objective measure, a fantastic job in Iran. You don't have to agree with their mission, but I mean the results they've achieved, what they've been able to pull off, has truly been extraordinary, and that should be a very easy statement to make by anybody on regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's move on to another facet of journalism. Brendan Carr, Donald Trump's commissioner, federal communications commissioner. He's got a lot of power. He could make life miserable for the people who have licenses to broadcast, the networks, for instance, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Brendan Carr recently threatened to revoke the broadcasters' licenses over their coverage of the war in Iran. He warned them that, quote, running hoaxes and news distortions, that he would have to correct the course before their license, they would have to correct the course before their licenses come up for renewal. I'm going to say something that to people who aren't professional journalists is going to sound a little off track. Journalists are allowed to be biased. They are. They're allowed to hate Donald Trump or love Donald Trump. They're allowed to love Joe Biden or hate Joe Biden. They're allowed to not tell us that Joe Biden had mental acuity problems. They're allowed to be bad journalists. And our response should be, we either tune them out, we don't read what they say, or we criticize them as loud and as publicly as we can. But we don't threaten the US government with all its immense power, can't threaten to take their licenses away if we don't like the coverage of the war in Iran. You can't do that. If you want to know what's un-American, that's un-American.
I agree. I think it's my personal view on this, Bernie, is that I do think it's a time to abolish the FCC. This is an agency that was created for a totally different era, of limited radio and TV frequencies on the public airwaves. Now Brendan Carr is just abusing the power that comes with that position, and he's basically trying to restore the fairness doctrine, which is something that conservatives like me have long opposed. I think you probably have too, Bernie. When there was talk, certainly in the pre-Trump era, about bringing back the fairness doctrine to try and help. You might remember back during the Bush era, during the Obama era, a lot of liberals were frustrated that liberal talk radio shows could not compete with conservative talk radio shows. The conservative ones were far more popular. And pretty much everybody, in the conservative movement back then opposed it, and for good reason. I don't want what is in the public interest, as far as free speech goes, to be unilaterally decided by partisan lackeys, which is what Brendan Carr is. I mean, he's presented himself as one since he's had that position. So, yeah, I think it's time for this government agency to be ended, or at least have its power severely limited.
You just can't threaten broadcast licenses, which is they'll go out of business if they lose their license. You can't say, if in effect, Brendan Carr would deny that he's saying it this way, but you can't say, if you don't report the news the way we like it, we're gonna put you out of business. That's just wrong. By the way, let me go off track for 30 seconds or so. Why do you think it is that in a country that's split pretty much 50-50, Rush Limbaugh was the king of talk radio, and Al Franken and the others on Air America couldn't get 10 people listening to them? Why is liberal talk radio such a failure and conservative talk radio such a success, at least in the days of Rush Limbaugh, when the country is split down the middle?
Right. I think it was, well, part of it had to do with back when Rush, first rose to stardom. There weren't as many, conservatism in the media was a little rarer. Not, but more so, there was more of it on on the radio. But I think if you ever actually listen to Al Franken and Air America, which I didn't do regularly, I was curious just to see what all it is just gloom and doom all the time. And at least it was back then, and just how, everything's going down the toilet, everything's and all that. And Rush Limbaugh, he had a much more spirited voice, I guess. I don't know if optimism is the word, but in some cases, yes, he was funny. In many cases, he was lighthearted. I didn't like the direction he ultimately went later in the Trump era, but he when you go back to early Glenn Beck too, I mean, he was a very funny guy. He was and he's changed a lot too as well. We could get into that, but I think the presentation was much different. It was much more friendly, spirited. It wasn't all doom and gloom. So I think that was a part of it.
You want to talk about gloom and doom? I watched part of Lawrence O'Donnell's show on MS Now. I've never watched the show. I can't stand it.
Right.
I know I can't stand it even without watching it. But I know somebody who had a bet on how many times he would say Trump in a 60-minute broadcast. Now, minus commercials, it's about a 48-minute program. And then when his guests are on, he's not talking. So it's maybe a 30-minute. How many times do you think he said the word Trump? He is the poster boy for Trump derangement syndrome, Lawrence O'Donnell. How many times do you think he said the word Trump in about 30 minutes?
Oh, 100?
Pretty close, about 80 times. How do you say he's obsessed? He needs help. He needs mental help.
Yeah, and it's worth just kind of reminding people he was pretty nutty before Trump too. I mean, I remember in 2012, I think he actually challenged one of Mitt Romney's sons to like a fist fight for something he said on air. He's always been a nut, and yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise to me that that's how he is now as well.
Okay, but you can make money on how many times?
Oh yeah,
you can make real money. All right, on to our last subject, one that I'm uncomfortable with. Robert Mueller died recently. Robert Mueller wasn't only the special prosecutor who arguably let the Russian collusion hoax go on longer than it needed to go on. Okay. Robert Mueller was also a student at Princeton who volunteered to go to Vietnam as a Marine. One of his buddies was, I think, wounded, or maybe worse than wounded, I'm not sure, and he volunteered. He got shot, got the Purple Heart, and as I said, he died recently. Our president went on social media and he said, "Good, I'm glad he's dead." Donald Trump is allowed to feel that way. He's allowed to think that to himself, but to say it out loud is reprehensible. And even if you admire Donald Trump and think he's one of the great presidents, you can't admire that. I hope all of us listening, all of you listening, can at least agree on that. You could like Donald Trump, you could like his policies, you could like the way he talks to Democrats, but please, I'm begging you, tell me you can't like good, I'm glad he's dead. That is just, certain things are just right and certain things are just wrong. That's just wrong.
Yeah, no, it's objectively disgraceful. This is what Trump does when someone he doesn't die, or sorry, when someone he doesn't like dies. He has this tendency to sort of run in while family members and friends are still, just starting to mourn their loss, and get in some rhetorical rib kicks, on there. And we saw that with Rob Reiner as well. We saw it with John McCain before him. It's something Trump likes to do, and he apparently can't help but do. And unfortunately, I what you said makes perfect sense, but I have seen many of his loyalists choose to, whether it's ignore it or rationalize it or even defend it, and further demonize Mueller. I don't know if you heard about this, Bernie, but Fox News didn't once mention what Trump posted about Mueller that entire weekend. They may have, since Monday or so, but they clearly understood how bad it was, but didn't want to offend their viewers by opening it up for discussion on the network. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
John, share with the audience what one of Fox's, the chief political analyst at Fox, Britt Hume, said, not on the air, but in a social media post.
Yeah, I don't have it exactly written down, but he basically said, this is what not only gets people to oppose Trump, but to actually hate Trump.
Right.
He said
let me just
he had to say, he didn't have to say a single thing about Mueller.
Let me just jump in on that. Politically, if you like Donald Trump, if you want him, if he could run a third time and you'd vote for him a third time, what he said is bad politically in addition to everything else, because it takes moderate voters who could lean one way or the other. They hear stuff like that, it turns them against Donald Trump. So if you like Donald Trump, you got to say you're against what he did, because politically it's not good for him, or I think it's not good for Republicans. Anyway, let me end where we began. I want to thank all our new people, all our new patrons, all the new people who are with us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I'd be here for another 10 minutes thanking you. So let me just say it once. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.